Finally, some positive leftist news. With the leftist cooks bringing the flavor.
Yeah, positive leftist news. I can't clap now. Oh, wait. Okay, that'll work.
That'll work.
Hello, friends.
And thank you for dropping by.
It's the time of the year. Or is it? Was it? It's a time of year.
And while some of us may be feeling wonderful and planning new beginnings and making resolutions, many will be struggling with all kinds of stresses and real-world hardships.
So here at Positive Leftist News, we want to share with you some positive leftist news to fill your heart with hope.
And to fill you in on projects and causes that you can get involved with. So, without further ado, on November 24th, a mass mobilization of Indigenous peoples and allies took the streets of Plymouth, Massachusetts for the National Day of Mourning. The National Day of Mourning was founded in 1970 by the late Wamsuta Frank James to mourn the landing of the Pilgrims and stand against the repression of American settler colonialism. The Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies were genocidal theocracies financed by the trade in enslaved people and built on stolen Wampanoag, Massachusetts, Nauset, Nipmuc, and Pennacook lands, and the first day of Thanksgiving was proclaimed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony Governor John Winthrop to celebrate the massacre of over 700 Pequot on the shores of the Mystic River. Wamsuta Frank James's granddaughter and co-leader of the United American Indians of New England, Keisha James, said to the crowd, "When people celebrate the myth of Thanksgiving, they are not only erasing our genocide, but celebrating it. We did not simply fade into the background, as the Thanksgiving myth says. We have survived and flourished. We have persevered. The very fact that you are here is proof that we did not vanish. Our very presence frees this land from the lies of the history books and the mythmakers." Participants demanded the return of all sacred Indigenous funerary items and human remains looted by U.S. institutions, the abolition of settler colonial borders and ISIS racist state terror regime, the full restoration of sovereign Indigenous territories, and the release of activist and political prisoner Leonard Peltier. Fantastic to see such a turnout and momentum in this crucially important movement. Land back here and everywhere.
Ohlone organizers and 400 community supporters gathered on November 25th for the annual Shellmount Walk. These walks have been held on the day after Unthanksgiving to raise awareness of Native California coastal nations' fight to save the ruins of their ancient burial mounds. This year, Ohlone people and supporters gathered for a rally at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, a 5,000-year-old Ohlone village and site of the earliest known human habitation in the Bay Area. Shell mounds mark burial sites throughout the coastal region in California and are the rightful lands of people from Miwok, Coastal Miwok, Bay Miwok, Ohlone, Patwin, Wapo, Wintu, Yokut, and other California coastal nations. Ohlone shell mounds have been desecrated by colonizers since Spanish soldiers first began imprisoning Ohlone people. The current protests are fighting against real estate developers who have turned shell mounds into parking lots and shopping malls. Criminal. Solidarity with the Ohlone and all nations fighting against settler colonial tyranny.
Make Amazon Pay Day has seen its third successful year. Workers held actions in over 30 countries on November 25th, or Black Friday, to organize against Amazon's unfair labor practices. Workers protested Amazon's unsafe working conditions, their deplorable union-busting tactics, and a long list of injustices. Nazma Akhtar, president of the Somalito Garment Shramik Federation in Bangladesh, highlighted that the workers represented by their federation face sexual harassment and discrimination when they tried to organize. Recognizing the connected nature of labor, the environment, and social issues, Make Amazon Pay demonstrations demand not only better wages, but also climate action and social justice. The increasingly global nature of these coordinated strikes and actions is significant. Global solidarity is what is needed to effectively bring transnational capitalism to heel. Don't get too comfortable, Bezos. Workers of the world are uniting.
In late November, workers across low-wage sectors such as retail, fast food, care, and gas station workers came together in Columbia, South Carolina to form a brand new cross-sector union, the Union of Southern Service Workers, USSW. USSW is a wing of one of the US's largest unions, the Service Employees International Union. The demands of USSW are a seat at the table in decision-making at work, just pay, dignity, and equal treatment, health and safety, and fair and consistent scheduling. With a focus on dignity and equality, emphasis is placed on making a stand against the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow racism in the South. Brandon Beecham, a worker at a Panera Bread in Atlanta, Georgia, stated, "With eyes wide open to the past and immense hope for a better future, we are building a union to fight for living wages, fair working conditions, and a voice on the job. We're coming together and digging in for the long haul as a union, because collective action is the best solution to improve our lives and support our families. Hear, hear. The union makes us strong."
On Thursday, November 17th, tens of thousands of people across Greece marched in anti-imperialist demonstrations to mark the 29th anniversary of the Athens Polytechnic Uprising of 1973. This Polytechnic Uprising was a student strike and revolt against the US-backed Greek military junta that ended in bloodshed. Ever since, marchers have come together annually to pay tribute to the fallen victims of police repression. In Athens, protesters marched towards the American embassy with anti-imperialist slogans, raising banners against NATO expansionism and US imperialism. KKE General Secretary Dimitris Koustambas stated, "The events and marches 49 years later show that the messages of the Polytechnic Uprising, such as 'out with the US and NATO, the basis of death,' against poverty and unemployment, for public and free education and health, against state repression, fascism, eavesdropping, and surveillance that is the very dictatorship of capital, they are still relevant, timeless, and alive to this day."
Over 400 smallholder farmers gathered in the city of Morogoro in mid-November for the 27th annual general meeting of the National Network of Small-Scale Farmers Groups in Tanzania, MVIWATA. The organization was founded in 1993 by self-organized farmers in the wake of the country's first structural adjustment program under the IMF and the World Bank. These neoliberal reforms undid the progress made under socialist president and leading anti-colonial figure Julius K. Nyerere, whose administration facilitated the nationalization of key industries and the collectivization of agriculture. Theodora Pius, the head of program at MVIWATA, explained that the peasantry and the workers were declared as the engines of the Tanzanian economy. There was massive state investment geared towards them. Farmers were depending on the government and selling their produce through cooperatives. This changed with the IMF's structural adjustment policies, and MVIWATA was born. Pius explains, "Groups of farmers came together and decided that they would travel throughout Tanzania to call on peasants to unite and have a unified voice, to demand their inclusion in national policies, to demand better prices for our produce, and to provide alternatives on agricultural extension services." It was their dream to ensure that MVIWATA goes to every village in Tanzania. MVIWATA has organized farmers stretching from groups at the grassroots all the way to a national network. Leading up to this year's meeting, the organization developed its 2022 to 2026 strategic plans. Its areas of priority include retaining the dignity of the farmers as a class, agroecology and food sovereignty, organizing for land rights, security and economic justice, using and banking local seeds, external trade agreements, gender-based justice, and Pan-African unity and solidarity. Mercy Dada Osai, a member of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, affirmed that MVIWATA was an important instrument for Pan-Africanist struggles because it is entrenched in defining a people's answer to the land, food, and peasant questions not just in Tanzania, but Africa and the rest of the world. It is creating a platform to bring together voices against the mass exploitation of peasants. It is imperative to solidarize, work, learn, agitate, and grow together into a powerful force in the fight for the rights of peasant farmers.
Workers in Zimbabwe's sugar milling and brewery industries have been mobilizing against unfair firings, stolen wages, and workplace discrimination. A strike action now looms which could affect 22,000 workers and the nation's entire sugar industry. The United Food and Allied Workers Union of Zimbabwe, UFUAZ, is currently supporting actions at Ngwebu breweries in the city of Bulawayo. Ishmael Muzuru, the Deputy General Secretary of UFUAZ, stated that workers at Ngwebu breweries have not been paid on time since January and have also seen cuts to medical and funerary funds. UFUAZ represents 500 of the 750 workers at Ngwebu breweries, and workers have support from Trade Union Congress of Zimbabwe. The union has declared that it will fight the employer using all means possible to protect the workers and their families, unless corrective measures are put in place immediately to ensure that employees' rights are protected. Elsewhere, Ufuwu's workers are preparing for a massive strike against the South African sugar milling giant Tongaat Hulett. Sugar workers are demanding higher wages to compensate for Zimbabwe's worsening economic conditions. Tongaat Hulett, which owns the majority of the sugar production industry in Zimbabwe, has posted profits every year but has not increased worker salaries. As Zimbabwe's currency falls deeper into inflation and a stability crisis, companies like Tongaat Hulett have been operating in US dollars. Workers are demanding pay in USD, as it is the currency that the businesses they make profitable operate in. Ufuwu's is affiliated with unions including the Sugar Production and Milling Workers Union, Zimbabwe Sugar Milling Industry Workers Union, and the Sugar Milling and Allied Workers Union of Zimbabwe. These unions have filed their intention to strike, but are currently awaiting a decision from the Ministry of Labour. PLN will watch as this story unfolds.
On Saturday, November 26th, thousands of people took to the streets of Dublin under the banner of Raise the Roof to demand urgent government measures to address the ever-increasing housing crisis across the nation. They called for policies that ensured the provision of affordable homes and rents. Protesters included leftist organisations from housing rights groups, trade unions, People Before Profit, the Communist Party of Ireland, and political parties including Sinn Féin and Workers' Party of Ireland. These demonstrations came in the wake of a 4-year severe housing crisis, coupled with recent soaring inflation rates impacting people's ability to pay rents and energy bills, leading to increasing evictions and homelessness. Graham Harrington, the International Secretary of the Communist Party of Ireland, said, "The Irish housing disaster is a result of the Irish state's policies working as designed. Homes have been commodified and turned into an investment asset. The result is mass homelessness, sky-high rents, as many evictions now as there was in the famine years, and one of the highest levels of vacant housing units in the world, all to ensure a bonanza in profits for landlords. The people have taken to organising themselves, taking the political offensive against the capital. The solution is universal public housing with rents linked to income, the reconquest of the basic means of life."
In late November, tenants in a Montreal apartment complex called Le Plateau dropped banners across balconies in protest against poor treatment by the Cromwell Management Inc., who are refusing to meet tenant demands. Cromwell Management Inc. evicted over 100 people for renovictions, where landlords renovate units and lease them at higher rates, while the 14 remaining tenants were left without heat with the colder months fast approaching. The banners stated, "Renoviction by Cromwell, I'm staying, construction hell," and, according to the Montreal Anonymous Tenants Union, tenants are demanding compensation, rent reductions, heating, and transparent and consensual construction work.
Tenants' unions are vitally important in this historical moment as the contradictions of capitalism sharpen. On that note, we move to another crucial tenant action in England. The London Renters Union organises renters from across England's capital city. Tenants are currently organising demonstrations against skyrocketing rents and increased eviction rates. Renters in London have seen a 20.5% average increase in rent costs and a 7.6% increase in so-called no-cause evictions. A press release from the London Renters Union said, "We're protesting against the big estate agents that make their money by pushing our rents up. There's already a rent freeze in Scotland. That means it's illegal for landlords in Scotland to raise the rent or evict renters. Let's fight for the same here." English tenants have a fight ahead of them, as statistics from Transparency International show that 27% of MPs own a second home and 43% of Tories and their colleagues hold a property interest. Shame. But indeed, Scotland has frozen rents up to March the 31st, 2023, with the option to extend the freeze. Scotland has also restricted landlords' ability to evict tenants. Fantastic news that we hope to see replicated worldwide.
After 12 days of peace talks, the Colombian government and leftist guerrilla group National Liberation Army, ELN, signed their first agreement, which allows the safe return of the Imbrera indigenous people to their lands in the Murido municipality in the Antigua department. The indigenous community was displaced due to the violence between the Colombian armed forces and ELN combatants. The agreement has been widely celebrated by the Colombian people. President Petro, Colombia's first leftist head of state, called for replicating similar peace agreements in other departments so that other communities could also recover their territories. In his campaign, President Petro promised to bring total peace to Colombia. After taking office in August, he began promoting peace negotiations with all illegal paramilitary and drug trafficking groups willing to engage in dialogue with the government and accept legal benefits in exchange for peace.
Over 25,000 truckers in South Korea have been on strike since November 23rd, culminating in a massive rally in Seoul on December 3rd, with all signs pointing to a continuation of the work stoppage. Truck drivers are demanding the permanent institution of the existing temporary minimum freight rate system that is set to expire this month, minimum pay guarantees for truckers in other sectors, and safe and healthy working conditions. They also argue that higher fuel prices and rising cost of living have forced them to take on longer hours. So far, the conservative Yoon Suk-yeol government has only agreed to a 3-year extension of the minimum freight rates and refused to consider a permanent pay guarantee. This second strike of the year came after nearly 6 months of failed negotiations. President Yoon Suk-yeol is threatening striking truckers with more back-to-work orders, but the Cargo Truckers Solidarity Union, or CTSU, which represents all 25,000 truckers on strike, has stated that its members will not comply with the order and that it will take legal action against such measures. Support for the truckers is growing in South Korea, with the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, KCTU, one of the largest trade union confederations in the country, having organized a solidarity rally on December 3rd. The crackdown on workers' rights has received international criticism from such organizations as the International Transport Workers Federation, who strongly condemned the crude attempt at strike-breaking. The CTSU released a statement during the strike saying, "The government and ruling party must immediately withdraw the Start Work Order, which took the basic rights of cargo workers hostage, and engage in sincere dialogue." Hold fast, truckers. Organized labor is bound to bring the government to its knees.
As Elon Musk rolled out his new Twitter Blue feature, which allowed users to be verified for $8, a few left-wing trolls used this to their advantage and cost several of the world's most vile corporations billions of dollars. Weapons manufacturer Lockheed Martin reportedly lost up to $7 billion in market value when a fake verified account tweeted that they would no longer be selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, Israel, or the United States. A similar fate befell pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly after an account tweeted, "Insulin is free now." Now that's trolling we can get behind.
On November 23rd, the Dutch Hague court ruled that the airstrikes carried out by the Dutch military in Afghanistan on June 17, 2007, killing 20 civilians, were a violation of international humanitarian law. These forces were part of the 2001 US-led imperialist coalition invading Afghanistan, and the strikes were carried out with insufficient information and inadequate attempts to establish the presence of combatants. The verdict came after 4 survivors filed a civil suit against the Dutch state. One survivor had at least 7 family members who were killed in the strikes. It's not every day that imperialist war crimes are acknowledged, and the Dutch state will now be forced to provide compensation to the victims.
Hailed as a resounding victory for LGBTQ+ people, Barbados has become the 4th Commonwealth country to get rid of 2 discriminatory laws this year. The country's High Court made the decision to repeal Section 9 and 12 of the Barbados Sexual Offences Act, also known as the Buggery and Indecency laws, which criminalized consensual same-sex intimacy. Punishment for convictions could be as damaging as life imprisonment. 2 LGBTQ+ advocates in Barbados initially filed the claim with the Health of Equals, a local organization fighting for equality, and the Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality. One of the case's litigants stated, "When I got into civil society organizing, I quickly understood I was building on the work of countless others before me. I was benefiting from the gains they made, and I had lived examples from the hardships they faced. Today's ruling is one step, one action of many impacting the LGBTQ+ community of Barbados. As it resonates with me, I already know there is more work to be done. We will continue on together." Similar laws were struck down in Antigua, St. Kitts, Nevis, and Barbuda, and these victories helped to accelerate the push to strike down anti-discriminatory LGBTQ laws in other nations in the Americas. France's lower house on Thursday voted by a large majority to enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution, with MPs on the left and centre saying that the US Supreme Court's overturning of a landmark ruling in June showed the need for new steps. Parliament approved the motion put forward by the leftist opposition, with 337 votes in favour and 32 against, but the path to enshrining abortion rights in the Constitution will not be easy, as a bill must be approved in the same terms by the lower house and the Senate, which is controlled by the right. A change of constitution would also have to go to a referendum, but opinion polls suggest that more than 80% of French voters are behind it. France Insoumise lawmaker Mathilde Panot said the move aims to prevent any regression. We don't want to give any chance to people hostile to abortion and contraception rights.
Artist Michelle Browder has founded a new museum and clinic at 33 South Perry Street in Montgomery, Alabama, in honor of the dozens of enslaved women and girls who are called the Mothers of Gynecology. At the site, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, along with other enslaved women and girls whose names have been lost to history, shed blood for the creation of American gynecology, despite their inability to consent. The site will now feature a museum, clinic, and training space for medical students, gynecologists, doulas, and midwives. The Mothers of Gynecology Health and Wellness Clinic will be a primary care unit that helps women and people with wombs who cannot afford those services, while also providing a space for doulas, midwives, and OBGYNs to collaborate to offer solutions to end the maternal health crisis. Bowder explained, whether it's a doula service, if you just need that friend to walk you through prenatal care or after postpartum depression, we want to provide a safe space for women and birthing people to come and find some relief, find a friend, and then also find some support.
Oregon's Governor Kate Brown decried death penalties as immoral and commuted 17 inmate sentences from death row this month. In a statement, Brown wrote, "Today I am commuting Oregon's death row so that we will no longer have anyone serving a sentence of death and facing execution in this state. I also recognize the pain and uncertainty victims experience as they wait for decades while individuals sit on death row, especially in states with moratoriums on executions, without resolution."
Climate activists at the University of Stirling in Scotland have voted in favour of making their menus 100% plant-based. The move will affect 3 food outlets owned by the Student Union. The students are aiming to make 50% of food plant-based by the 2023-24 academic year and 100% by 2025. The motion was put forward by the Plant-Based Universities campaign, which was started in 2021 by Animal Rebellion. Co-founder Nathan McGovern said the Plant-Based Universities campaign was set up as a direct reaction to UK universities deciding to ignore the research that they all too often provide on the impacts of animal farming and fishing on the environment. The premise is very simple. It's about holding them accountable to their climate pledges and obligations to give students a livable future. While critics decry changing individual consumption choices as futile, coordinated change at institutional levels is far more impactful. Congratulations to student organisers for their successful campaign.
Comrades, if you have good news from the current month, please send your stories to totalliberationpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Javi for the positive news jams. Thank you to Cosmo for the positive news background. Thank you to Catherine, Ash, Mexi, Seb, and Jacob for script writing and production.
And thank you to us for hosting and editing this one. Everyone else too.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. Grand.
If you'd like to support the expansion of our team and output, please go to patreon.com/positiveleftistnews.
Or you can give us a one-time tip. The link is in the description box below.
Yeah, come on, sometimes.